When decommissioning a leased building, it's important to consider the proper handling of data and voice cabling. While specific built-in codes may not directly address the disposal of this cabling, industry best practices provide valuable guidance. Ideally, if possible, remove all data and voice cabling from the walls and ceilings. This is the preferred method as it prevents potential hazards and minimizes waste. However, if removing the cabling is not feasible, cut the cables as close to their terminations as possible. Leave approximately 6 to 12 inches of slack in each wall or ceiling cavity. Bundle the cut cables together and cap them with wire nuts. There are other considerations to keep in mind. Firstly, check your lease agreement for any specific requirements regarding the disposition of cabling. Secondly, consider the value of the cabling. If it is valuable, it may be worth removing. Thirdly, dispose of the cabling in accordance with local regulations. Removing the cabling can add to the decommissioning cost, but it can also save money in the long run by firstly, eliminating the need for future remediation if the cabling becomes damaged or poses a hazard, and secondly, reducing the cost of potential environmental penalties for improperly disposed of cabling. While there are no specific code requirements, it is generally recommended to remove cabling during building decommissioning whenever feasible. Leaving the cabling in place poses potential hazards and can increase future costs. Therefore, consider the costs and benefits of removing versus leaving the cabling in place, alongside any specific requirements outlined in the lease agreement, to make an informed decision that aligns with both industry best practices and financial considerations. The recommendations mentioned helps to ensure a safe and responsible decommissioning process, minimizing future liabilities and potential environmental concerns. When dealing with electrical wiring during decommissioning, safety should always be the top priority. Before commencing any work, ensure that the power supply to the circuits is completely disconnected and properly locked out and tired out to prevent accidental re-energization. Wear appropriate personal protective equipment, including safety glasses, gloves, and possibly a hard hat, depending on the work environment. When cutting wires, use insulated tools designed for electrical work to minimize the risk of electric shock. If removing the wiring, carefully detach it from any fixtures, outlets, or other devices, taking note of how it was connected for future reference if needed. If the wiring is no longer needed, dispose of it properly according to local regulations, which may involve recycling or other environmentally responsible methods. If leaving the wiring in place, ensure that the ends are properly insulated with wire connectors or electrical tape to prevent any accidental contact and potential hazards. Additionally, consider labeling the wiring to indicate that it is no longer in use, which can help prevent confusion or accidental use in the future. Remember to consult with a qualified electrician if you are unsure about any aspect of the electrical work or if you encounter any unexpected issues. Their expertise can help ensure that the decommissioning process is carried out safely and in compliance with all applicable regulations. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, does not specifically address the decommissioning of electrical wiring in buildings. However, several articles and sections within the NEC can be applied to ensure safe and compliant practices during the decommissioning process. Article 100 provides definitions of terms used throughout the NEC, which can be helpful in understanding the requirements for decommissioning electrical systems. Article 110 covers the general requirements for electrical installations, including workmanship, equipment labeling, and access to electrical equipment. These requirements are relevant during decommissioning to ensure that any remaining electrical equipment is left in a safe and accessible condition. Article 225 addresses outside branch circuits and feeders, which may be applicable if the building has outdoor electrical wiring or equipment that needs to be decommissioned. Article 230 covers services, which are the conductors and equipment used to deliver electricity from the utility company to the building. Decommissioning the service may involve disconnecting the service conductors, removing the service equipment, and coordinating with the utility company. Article 250 provides requirements for grounding and bonding, which are essential for electrical safety. During decommissioning, it is important to maintain proper grounding and bonding of any remaining electrical equipment to prevent electrical shock hazards. Article 300 covers wiring methods, including the types of wiring allowed, installation requirements, and protection against physical damage. These requirements are relevant when removing or abandoning electrical wiring during decommissioning. Article 400 addresses flexible cords and cables which may be present in the building for powering equipment or appliances. Decommissioning these cords and cables may involve disconnecting them, removing them, and disposing of them properly. Article 410 covers luminaires, lamp holders, and lamps, which are the components of lighting systems. Decommissioning lighting systems may involve removing the luminaires, disconnecting the wiring, and disposing of the lamps properly. Article 440 addresses air conditioning and refrigerating equipment, which may have specific electrical requirements. Decommissioning this equipment may involve disconnecting the power supply, removing the equipment, and disposing of it properly. Article 600 covers electric signs and outline lighting, which may be present on the exterior of the building. Decommissioning these signs and lighting systems may involve disconnecting the power supply, removing the signs and lighting, and disposing of them properly. Article 700 addresses emergency systems, which are designed to provide power during a power outage. Decommissioning emergency systems may involve disconnecting the power supply, removing the equipment, and ensuring that the building is no longer reliant on the emergency system. Article 705 covers interconnected electric power production sources, such as solar panels or generators, which may be connected to the building's electrical system. Decommissioning these systems may involve disconnecting the power source, removing the equipment, and coordinating with the utility company. While the NEC does not provide specific instructions for decommissioning, these articles and sections can be used as a guide to ensure that the process is carried out safely and in compliance with electrical codes. It is always recommended to consult with a qualified electrician or electrical engineer to ensure that the decommissioning process is performed correctly and in accordance with all applicable regulations. The NEC, or National Electrical Code, provides guidelines for electrical installations and safety. While it doesn't explicitly detail decommissioning procedures, here's how you can apply it. Firstly, disconnect power, ensure all circuits are de-energized before any work begins. Follow lockout tagout procedures to prevent accidental re-energization, as outlined in NEC 110.25. Secondly, wiring removal. When removing wiring, follow NEC 300 for proper method. Remove abandoned cables completely where accessible. Thirdly, abandoned cables. If cables cannot be removed, NEC 725.3 and 800.52 address abandoned cables. Terminate the end safely with approved methods. Fourthly, grounding and bonding. Maintain grounding and bonding for any remaining electrical equipment, as per NEC 250. Fifthly, conduit and raceways. Remove or properly terminate unused conduits and raceways to prevent them from becoming hazards. Sixthly, documentation. Keep records of the decommissioning work, including which circuits were de-energized and which cables were removed or abandoned. Seventhly, qualified personnel. Ensure that decommissioning work is performed by qualified electricians who understand NEC requirements. Eighthly, local codes. Check with local authorities for any specific requirements or permits related to electrical decommissioning. Ninthly, safety. Always prioritize safety and follow all applicable safety procedures when working with electrical systems. The NEC provides a framework for safe electrical practices, even during decommissioning. Always consult the latest edition of the NEC and local codes for specific requirements. Several factors influence the cost of decommissioning electrical wiring in a building. Firstly, the extent of the wiring is a significant factor. The more wiring that needs to be removed or made safe, the higher the cost. This includes considering the length of the wiring runs, the number of circuits, and the complexity of the electrical system. Secondly, the type of wiring used can also affect the cost. Older wiring types, such as knob and tube wiring or wiring with asbestos insulation, may require special handling and disposal procedures, which can increase the cost. Thirdly, accessibility of the wiring is another important factor. Wiring that is easily accessible, such as in open ceilings or walls, will be less expensive to decommission than wiring that is buried in walls, floors, or underground. Fourthly, labor costs can vary depending on the location and the qualifications of the electrical workers. Areas with higher labor rates will generally have higher decommissioning costs. Fifthly, disposal costs can also contribute to the overall cost. Some types of wiring and electrical components may contain hazardous materials that require special disposal methods, which can be expensive. Sixthly, permits and inspections may be required by local authorities, which can add to the cost. Seventhly, the presence of hazardous materials such as asbestos or lead can significantly increase the cost of decommissioning due to the need for specialized abatement procedures. To minimize the cost of decommissioning electrical wiring, consider the following. Firstly, plan ahead and carefully assess the scope of the work to identify any potential challenges or cost-saving opportunities. Secondly, obtain multiple quotes from qualified electrical contractors to ensure that you are getting a competitive price. Thirdly, consider removing only the wiring that is necessary, rather than removing all of the wiring in the building. Fourthly, recycle or salvage any materials that can be reused, such as copper wiring or metal conduit. Fifthly, ensure that the electrical workers are properly trained and experienced to minimize the risk of errors or accidents, which can increase costs. Sixthly, communicate clearly with the electrical contractor about your expectations and budget to avoid misunderstandings or surprises. By carefully considering these factors and taking proactive steps to manage the decommissioning process, you can minimize the cost while ensuring that the work is done safely and in compliance with all applicable regulations. When decommissioning electrical wiring, it's crucial to prioritize safety and compliance with regulations. Firstly, always de-energize the circuits before starting any work. Use appropriate lockout-tagout procedures to prevent accidental re-energization. Secondly, wear appropriate personal protective equipment, including safety glasses, gloves, and a hard hat if necessary. Thirdly, inspect the wiring for any signs of damage or deterioration, such as frayed insulation or exposed conductors. Fourthly, use insulated tools to prevent electric shock. Fifthly, be aware of the presence of hazardous materials, such as asbestos or lead, and follow proper procedures for handling and disposal. Sixthly, ensure that the work area is well ventilated to prevent the buildup of fumes or dust. Seventhly, dispose of electrical waste properly, following local regulations for recycling or disposal of hazardous materials. Eighthly, consult with a qualified electrician if you have any doubts or concerns about the safety of the work. Ninthly, comply with all applicable electrical codes and regulations, including the National Electrical Code, or NEC, and local building codes. Tenthly, obtain any necessary permits or approvals before starting the work. 11thly, document the decommissioning process, including the date, scope of work, and any safety measures taken. 12thly, if you are not qualified to perform the work safely, hire a licensed electrical contractor to do it for you. By following these safety precautions and compliance guidelines, you can minimize the risk of accidents, injuries, and code violations during the decommissioning of electrical wiring. Several regulations and standards govern the decommissioning of electrical wiring in buildings. Firstly, the National Electrical Code, or NEC, provides comprehensive standards for electrical installations and safety. While it doesn't specifically address decommissioning, many of its provisions apply to the safe removal or abandonment of electrical wiring. Secondly, local building codes and ordinances may have specific requirements for electrical decommissioning, including permit requirements, inspection procedures, and disposal methods. Thirdly, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, sets standards for workplace safety, including electrical safety. OSHA regulations may apply to the decommissioning of electrical wiring, particularly in commercial or industrial buildings. Fourthly, the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, regulates the disposal of hazardous materials such as asbestos, lead, and mercury, which may be present in electrical wiring or components. EPA regulations may require special handling and disposal procedures for these materials. Fifthly, state and local environmental agencies may have additional regulations for the disposal of electrical waste, such as requirements for recycling or proper disposal of electronic components. Sixthly, industry standards, such as those developed by the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, or IEE, and the National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA, may provide guidance on best practices for electrical decommissioning. Seventhly, manufacturers' instructions for electrical equipment and components should be followed when decommissioning those items. Eighthly, lease agreements or built-in contracts may contain specific requirements for the decommissioning of electrical wiring, particularly in leased or rented properties. Ninthly, insurance policies may have requirements for electrical decommissioning, such as requiring the use of licensed contractors or compliance with specific codes and regulations. Tenthly, it is important to consult with qualified professionals such as electricians, engineers, and environmental consultants to ensure that the decommissioning process complies with all applicable regulations and standards. By following these regulations and standards, you can ensure that the decommissioning of electrical wiring is done safely, responsibly, and in compliance with the law.